The outpost, cash, diesel, and a flag with no country. 3 days before that barcode misfired, the road ended in thorn and heat shimmer. No border post, just a rusted drum, a rope across the track, and a flag no ministry would claim. After sundown, a convoy rolled in blacked out, 2 fuel trucks breathing hot, a flatbed stacked with burlap, 3 pickups with men who didn't rush. Generators coughed awake. Agri-equipment meant diesel tonight. Here, stakes weren't theoretical. If this line held, or turned into bargaining power and cash reached markets by morning. If it snapped, the mine choked, pumps stopped, and 3 villages rationed sugar by spoon. Every liter of diesel was a promise and a threat. Keep the pit alive, and somewhere a procurement desk could hit reorder on parts that would become a swarm. The men in charge didn't bark. They counted. Contractors who used to wear Wagner patches and now wore Africa Corps logos moved with quiet authority. A foreman with a satellite phone and a comma-shaped scar-thumbed sax nodded at the weighbridge. The scales red LED blinked, died, revived, died again, the ritual failure that always arrived after dark. The excuse was heat. The truth lived in notebooks, weights rounded down for the diggers, up for the buyers, value minted by pen. A local chief stepped from a white boo-boo that caught every beam. He waited for the second truck to hiss before he shook hands. The deal had rules: fuel for ore, access for protection, a clinic in 6 months, a generator soon. He kept the road safe enough that school could happen on Tuesdays and market on Fridays. Change the rate, and the flag over the drum might change by dawn. Meanwhile, something subtle traced across the sky. Night-only traffic deepened on a track that used to hold goats, tire cuts widening week by week. From orbit, a rectangle of scraped earth grew by meters, work lamps brightening past midnight when no inspector came. Prosperity from 400 miles up. On the ground, it sounded like a compressor whining through a cracked belt and men yelling over a pump that drank too fast. The weighbridge was the choke. A European badge on the frame, a maintenance sticker long expired, and a mechanic who always had a sensor on order. Each time the LED died, the handshake replaced the printout, and the sax rode off with numbers nobody outside that circle could contest. Taxes don't touch a handshake, neither do sanctions. Micro stories made the math sting. A miner who pulled a rich pocket watched the chief's nephew steer the shiniest sack to the Russian pickup. He asked for an extra jerrycan. He got half. A boy rolled drums down the incline, eyes on his toes. The foreman's sat phone buzzed, twice, then again. He silenced it and lit a cigarette he shouldn't smoke. He wasn't worried about miners. He was worried about being late. Impact spread like a rumor that turned true. Within a month, better rifles leaned in the shade of roadside cafes. No shakedowns, just presence. A single-channel radio tower lit up on the ridge. The clinic opened 2 mornings a week with borrowed sutures, and a woman told her sister the Russians kept their word. A teacher got asked to run night classes in fundamentals for men who didn't bring notebooks. The militia wasn't announced. It settled in like a fence along the road. Parallel beats tied dirt to distant dark. While the pit chewed another meter, substations far away started taking hits closer together. Not catastrophic, just enough to keep repair crews sprinting and the grid off balance. The timelines overlapped in a way you only see when you plot them. Fuel off a truck or out of a hole, a promise under a dead LED. Weeks later, a midnight stutter in a city's power and 1,000 fridges warming in the dark. Everyone here knew ore wasn't money until a stamp said so. The chief had watched bracelets fail to buy medicine when the wrong form got the wrong stamp, or needed a birth certificate. Somewhere, a refinery name waited on a server, an ISO code cloned into a mirror registry a broker would trust more than his own eyes. No furnace, no door, just a green check in a private cache that let bars exist in 2 places at once. The Africa Corps men didn't need to understand the mirror, they needed to keep the pumps turning. Their paycheck rode on throughput. The chief's influence rode on quiet roads. The miners' children went to class when diesel flowed and went to the river when it didn't. Every player had a reason to nod at the weighbridge and wave the convoy through. A satellite blinked, a notebook closed, a rope lifted, and the pipeline took its first breath. Cash swapped for sacks, sacks for stamps, stamps for credits that would never show up on a dollar wire. The foreman finally answered his buzzing phone, listened, and said only Friday. He pocketed the handset, checked the sky the way desert men do, then waved the flatbed forward. The boys rolled another drum. The LED stayed dark. And somewhere far from Thorn and Salt, a parts list updated under HS code 8413, right on time. The Ghost Refinery, a name without a door. To turn sacks into spendable power, you needed a stamp, not a wax seal, an industrial identity that banks, brokers, and insurers would treat as gospel. Address, license, ISO certification. The trick was none of it had to exist beyond paper. It only had to exist in the places compliance officers check when they're busy. The first clue came from a site visit that didn't make sense. An auditor followed invoices to an industrial park and found scrub and goat tracks behind a corrugated fence. A sun-faded sign promised future employment zone. On paper, the refinery had a phone number, a company logo, and an ISO certification formatted exactly how screens like to see it. On the ground, no foundations, no stack, no door, just wind and dust. The documentation looked clean because it borrowed its cleanliness. A defunct, legitimate refinery's ISO certification line had been cloned into a private mirror registry. An accelerator brokers relied on so they didn't have to wait for the official database. Somewhere, years back, an admin scraped the registry for speed and left an exceptions file loose. Into that gap stepped a tax haven shell that licensed the cloned identity to a near twin with one extra word in the name, and a logo that felt like a photocopy 2 shades lighter. The mirror made the lie comfortable. The official ISO lookup would have flagged a closure notice dated 3 years earlier. The mirror, updated on a lazy weekly cache, green checked a near match because someone had widened checksum tolerance to reduce false negatives. A 1-digit drift that should have failed still slid through. That's how one bar's barcode lived in 2 worlds at once. Invalid in the official register, valid in the mirror under Refining Solutions East. Once stamped, bullion behaved like any other commodity. It moved to compliance-friendly hubs, flew insured, landed in vaults. A checker scanned a barcode, saw a current ISO line, and logged received. Insurers bound cover because their internal portals pulled from the same mirror, and nobody wanted to slow standard shipments in a busy quarter. Risk on paper looked ordinary. Origin, thanks to the cloned line, looked settled. Meanwhile, the Ghost learned a rhythm. Validations always hit Fridays at 23:55 local, 5 minutes before the mirror's weekly cache rolled. That meant anyone cross-checking on Monday saw fresh green and moved on. It wasn't just a stamp, it was a metronome. A junior compliance analyst finally drew the timing on a whiteboard and watched the pattern stare back. She dug into headers and found every Friday burst resolved from an IP range registered to a logistics firm that shared directors with a broker known for heavy unallocated gold flows. Unallocated meant the desk booked exposure, not bars, no forklifts, no seals, plenty of deniability. The Ghost Refinery stamp let those desks pretend they were nowhere near a conflict when they were bathing in it. An inspection team tried to put hands on metal. Locals in reflective vests gave a tour of forklifts that smelled too clean and an office lined with framed certificates printed on thick paper with no raised seals. The plant manager apologized for a maintenance shutdown, produced a logbook with entries in 2 inks, and offered tea. In a corner, cathode plates stacked by a door looked like they'd been arranged for a photograph. A control panel hummed, but the breakers sat in the off position. The mirror told on itself again. Booking logs meant for ops, never for outsiders. Linked refinery stamped bars to beneficiaries with names you've already heard whispered. Educational kits, research optics, weather platforms. The euphemisms matched invoices that later moved brushless motors as HS8413, pumps for liquids, optics as survey gear, and airframes as polymer casings. Fridays fed Mondays. Mondays fed manifests. Weeks later, a grid coughed in blue light. Insurers didn't see that ledger. They saw loss ratios and a corridor that had behaved for years. Brokers didn't see a goat track. They saw spreads that tightened at quarter end when the mirror's cache kept desks from asking extra questions. The ghost depended on that laziness like lungs depend on air. Then came the human twist that made it all fragile. The contractor who built the mirror cache died years earlier. His scripts kept running on a server auto-renewed to a forgotten corporate card. The exceptions list, the place East lived, never got audited. A dead man's code kept validating a phantom refinery that moved real money and bought real parts that landed in real wreckage. Investigators pushed on a checksum, and the whole quiet cathedral rang. The mirror's green checks lined up with SBFS adjacent payment notes carrying equivalent value at a say. Those notes mapped to procurement shells that never touched dirt. Down drones coughed the same firmware signing keys quarter after quarter. MAC address batches appeared in swarms the same week. Pump consignments cleared free zones. It wasn't courtroom proof. It was choreography. A micro story sealed it. The analyst who sketched the timing caught a certificate refresh at 23:57 Friday. She stayed, ordered cold noodles, and flagged 3 shipments booked against that validation. On Monday, a port added secondary inspection to those exact consignments. Foam cut, motors surfaced. A week later, a city that should have gone dark at midnight didn't. The ghost refinery was a name without a door, an ISO line without a furnace, a green check that taught a pipeline to breathe on Fridays. Close the mirror, narrow the checksum, and the barcodes stop living in 2 worlds. You don't need to kick in a gate to break a spell made of paperwork. You only need to make the lie slow down long enough for daylight to catch it. The commodity desk that does hold metal. Stamped bars mean nothing until someone turns them into numbers that clear. That's what the desk did. 15 floors up, glass walls, 2 clocks set to London and Dubai, a muted TV looping tickers. No vault on site, no forklifts booked. Their edge lived in unallocated gold, positions, not pallets, hedged, rolled, unwound, and booked as tidy profits that didn't smell like mines or mirrors. The stakes ran through inboxes. If they took the flow tied to that ghost refinery line, the pipeline hummed. If they balked, procurement fronts would wait on credits and hubs would misbuild windows. Traders told themselves the risk was reputational, not lethal. Fines, clawbacks, career dents. They never said grid or drone at the desk. They said spread and counterparty. The first hook was price. A junior analyst, precise, sleep-deprived, flagged a 60-80 cent anomaly on overnight unallocated swaps that tightened like clockwork ahead of the mirror's Friday cash and snapped back by Monday close. He overlaid it with vault receipts inside their internal tool, the ones that simply marked exposure to pooled metal, and with broker prints showing a rush of origin tags tied to that East suffix. The chart looked like free money fenced by compliance language. He sent it up with the subject line ref flow timing oddities. His manager skimmed for words that start fights, sanctions, Wagner, Africa, and saw none. He saw ISO valid, our counterparty, insurance bound. He wrote back, tradable. The kid added a second chart. When they bought the spread in that window, the reversion financed itself by Monday. It looked mechanical. It looked like a permission slip. Phones warmed. Brokers pitched distressed African flow. No country, just refinery outages and temporary bottlenecks. The desk didn't ask for foundations or smokestacks. They asked if the origin met good delivery if needed. The broker said, unallocated, delivery not anticipated. Everyone relaxed. Paper, not pallets. Positions, not bars. They put on size in slices. Long, unallocated exposure against forwards that offset the book through Asia, where a metals house with a taste for shadows took the other side. The desk hit the narrowest windows, Fridays just before the mirror cashed, Mondays as green checks refreshed. PNL blossomed in steady increments. Quarter to date, the strategy became flow. Flow became identity. Identity became bonus math. Meanwhile, tells crept into the hedging. An Asian broker widened spreads precisely when HS 8413 consignments, pumps on paper, spiked through a free zone. A mid-tier bank's metals desk pulsed in night sessions right after SBFS-linked credits landed for an agri-cooperative with no fields. Nobody said collusion. They said market color. The kid still couldn't shake the overlay in his head. He mapped MAC address OUIs from downed drones against their Friday tickets. Twice in 6 weeks, clusters of identical OUIs showed up in wreckage within days of the desk's best Fridays. He printed the scatter and walked it into his manager's office. Quarter end was 12 days away. The manager didn't look up. "Correlation isn't causation," he said, softer now. "If compliance clears it, it's cleared." He forwarded the memo to legal with routine check. Legal replied with a paragraph about ISO validation protocols and reliance on industry standard registries. The mirror counted as industry standard. Box ticked. They sized up again. The desk's owners liked the curve, small drawdowns, tidy mean reversion, compelling narrative for investors who wanted market neutrality, while the world caught fire. Internally, they tagged the trades as ARB East, a label that said nothing and everything at once. Here S where the human hits. On a Wednesday, the kid tightened a model flag so anything touching the East origin needed a second sign-off. The manager overrode it as seasonal. The kid walked home past lit windows and watched a video of a transformer explode, blue-white, a city guttering for air. He thought about calling a regulator, then read his contract again and poured cold coffee down a drain. Meanwhile, counterparties gained the rail. When the desk unwound for a gain, the broker owed a shell, the shell owed a coup, and the messages hopped through SPFS-adjacent fields that carried equivalent value at a say. The settlement record didn't show dollars. It showed grams. It showed a promise backed by bars the desk never had to smell. A micro-story landed on a bland Friday. The kid's model pinged a perfect window at 23:54, 1 minute before the mirror's cache. He hesitated, then clicked hold. 30 seconds later, his manager leaned over and hit execute. Monday, PNL smiled. Tuesday, a crate of pumps cleared a free zone on a lane their risk engine never flagged. 2 weeks later, a substation he'd circled on a spreadsheet coughed twice and went dead. The impact rippled in spreadsheets and in rooms with humming jigs. The desk booked profits that turned into credits that hit integrator shells inside 48 hours. The hub stopped pleading and started scheduling. Motors, optics, airframes lined up on benches, and a signing utility chirped green as firmware rolled. The distance between a Friday ticket and a Monday build collapsed into habit. Owners had even gained downside. If a sanction ever tagged the ghost suffix or a linked shell, they'd novate exposure to a clean affiliate one jurisdiction over and book losses as exceptional. The strategy was a ladder of exits built before the building caught fire. The kid wasn't in the exits. He was in the stairwell. And there it was, the hairline crack. The anomaly depended on a lazy checksum in a dead man's mirror, on SPFS field cousins that slid past filters, on quarter-and rhythms nobody wanted to interrupt. It depended on no one lining up firmware keys, Mac batches, HS8413 hops, and desk tickets on one ugly chart. The kid had come close. He hadn't broken it, not yet. But every Friday, as the clock crawled toward 23:55, he felt the metronome tap against his ribs and wondered which line on his screen would light a runway or darken a city.